Good afternoon. It's really nice to see so many guests here. We're going to have a splendid 1.5 to 2 hours the next. First, I'm going to introduce the Afghanistan National Institute of Music, ANIM. It was founded in 2010 in Kabul, Afghanistan, with the mission to have a special focus on supporting the most disadvantaged children in Afghanistan, orphans, street working vendors, and girls. ANIM is a specialist music school. From grade 4 to grade 14, they are one of the very few co-educational schools in Afghanistan, and currently the only music school. When I met Dr. Sarmast earlier this year, he had one wish for ANIM to play here in Sweden. In his history, ANIM has never played here. So I'm very proud to announce that Dr. Sarmast's wish will come true. We have invited Sora, the all-woman orchestra from ANIM, to come to Stockholm in March 2019 for a concert. Yeah, I'm very proud of that. So I hope all of you will come to see this orchestra March 8, 2019. Now I would like to introduce Lasse Bengtsson. He's a journalist, as you all know. He also worked in Kabul for 2 years, working for the Swedish Afghanistan Committee. And here he is, the one and only Dr. Ahmad Sarmast.
Thank you very much, Marie. And it's so good to be here and once again sit here with you, Ahmad. And it's truly an honor, actually. I would start to say that. Because I've been to your institute myself in Kabul and noticed the power of this institute. This was when it was reasonably newly opened in 2010. And then I was there also during a concert later on in 2012. And you get so impressed by the power of these students and everything they are doing and their faces. And with the kids sitting there together and playing, boys and girls together, learning these instruments, and not just learning the instruments, they are learning life also. And they are learning everything from scratch. And many of them are street kids, and they come from poor circumstances. And it's a fantastic place. But it's also this, I have to say this, because this is a very dramatic story, obviously. This is not a usual story. It's not just a usual prize winner sitting here right now. It's something extra, I would say. I've been a journalist for 40 years. 45 years, or maybe I can't count, but I've been for a long time. And this is extraordinary, actually. So, but everything, I shouldn't talk too much myself, but I get a little bit carried away here.
It makes my life easier.
So, I just want to say this. We are sitting in a music school here. And music schools in different places of the world can look differently. And the situation for the students are completely different, I would say. I noticed one thing, Ahmad, earlier today. You said that, rather easily, we risk our lives going to our school. And that is you and the students. If we start with that, we risk our lives. Try to explain that to this audience. How do you risk your life?
I don't know how many people here knows the contemporary history of Afghanistan and when it comes to arts and culture. Afghanistan was the first country in our time where a cultural genocide took place in mid-1990s. When the people of Afghanistan was deprived from their, not only from their musical identity, but at the same time, a systematic cultural genocide took place against historical monuments of this country. In other words, there was a systematic politics in play to eliminate this nation, because I strongly believe a nation is alive when its culture is alive. And when that systematic demolition of arts and culture was taking place in Afghanistan, it was not just historical monument, it was not just music, but practically all tangible and intangible cultural heritage of Afghanistan come under attack. And musicians of the country, they went probably through the hardest time of their life. First of all, a musician who've been professionally trained, and the only way to make a living, it was through music. That mean was taken away from them. Not just taken, but at the same time, many musical instruments was destroyed in the eyes of the musician. I can tell you the story of a very well-known Dilruba player of Afghanistan, a traditional instrument of the country. When his instrument was broken in front of his eyes, within an hour he got a heart attack and he passed away. He couldn't stand it. We here, probably majority of people in this room are musicians, but can you imagine when a country, when a nation is without music? Can you imagine Sweden or any other given country without music? When you're not allowed to play music, when you're not allowed to listen to music, when you're not allowed to learn music. That's what we went through. When we are talking that we're taking risk, or the girls and boys are taking risk to come to the music school, because the same forces who once deprived the people of Afghanistan from their voice, and the same forces which have been trying to eliminate the history and at the same time get rid of the cultural past of this nation, they're still around. And they're not going to give up any opportunity to silence the people of Afghanistan once again. Even in the last 17 years, when there was a lot of changes and music is back part of our society, but still there was so many attacks organized against musicians, against cultural institutions, against music shops. And when we're talking, we are risking our life, because a concert of my students in 2014 was a subject of a suicide bomber.
We will talk more about that, Ahmad, if you don't mind, later, because this is a very dramatic thing with Ahmad personally involved in this attack. We will come back to that, actually.
Yeah, I was not the organizer, by the way.
No, but you were the victim of this, and we will get back to that, because this is very interesting also. But I want to stay with this, which you just said, the destruction of the culture. Maybe we should refresh the audience memory a little bit. You probably, some of you, of course, watched this on television, the destruction of the famous Buddha statues in Bamiyan province. The Taliban, they took Pakistani engineers there to do the hard work. And then they bombed and destroyed these famous, world-famous Buddha statues. And the world around just sighed and grasped, and what can we do? And then afterwards, they destroyed also, under the leadership of the former Taliban cultural minister himself, the Afghan National Museum. So I have to ask you, can you explain to this audience, and they also, as you said, they bombed the music stores all over Afghanistan when I was there myself. Can you try to explain why are they doing this? What is so frightening with culture?
I normally say that the only way forward in Afghanistan, it is through arts and culture. We cannot defeat extremism just by military means. We have to defeat their ideology. And to defeat the ideology, we have to give an alternative to the people. And the strongest and the most powerful alternative that we can give to the people is arts and culture, and more precisely also, if I'm going to narrate, music. We all in this room, we are very well aware of the power of music, that what a role arts, culture, and music can play in transcending barriers, in bringing people closer to each other, in enlightening and educating people. And that's why they probably are very well aware of the power of arts and culture. And when I say that a nation is alive when their arts and culture is alive, and that's why when you want to turn a big mass into a slave, you have to deprive them from their arts, culture, and you have to deprive them from education, because through education and arts we can enlighten the people and give them a ground to distinguish between their enemies and between their friends.
But they still have some form of music, the Taliban, and if you should try to describe what kind of music they are allowing.
There's many stories in Afghanistan about the double standards. While the Taliban banned the music and deprived the people from having access to music, listening to music, practicing music, learning music, but at the same time they've been listening to music in hiding themselves.
Really?
There's many stories, yes, but at the same time it's not just they've been listening to music, but at the same time they use music to glorify their comrades, to propagate for their causes. And therefore, they adapted many well-known popular songs of Afghanistan previously performed by such a well-known singer as Ahmad Sarmast, that we've been listening to his song just a few minutes back. Those songs have been adapted by totally new poetry, which was glorifying the Taliban. But again, it clearly shows that they were well aware of the power of music. Yeah. Otherwise, they wouldn't use it for their own purposes as well, but they use it for their own purposes while depriving people from their to enjoy the beauty of music.
But formally, I think, is that correct, that their kind of music reminds quite a lot of the one you can see in ISIS propaganda videos? This very low tone and, you know, without song and just some kind of one tone, and quite suggestive music.
Their music was without instrumental accompaniment.
Yeah.
But the difference between that music and the one that you described is that they adapted very well-known popular song of Afghanistan. So it was not just a monotone song, but also at the same time, many musicians who were not able to leave Afghanistan or who did not have any other skills to make a living, they joined the group of chanters of the Taliban. It was not precisely a professional singing. It was more of a chanting without instrumental accompaniment. And many instrumentalists and singers, to make a living, they joined those forces and began singing the same songs.
But during the time when the Taliban reigned, you were in exile in Australia and previously also in Soviet Union. But can you describe the kind of life? Of course, you had all friends back in Kabul and in Afghanistan. What was the kind of life there during the Taliban reign, if you are speaking cultural-wise, so to say?
No cultural activities took place during that time, because what kind of cultural life we are speaking about when people are not allowed to listen to music, when people are deprived from watching movies, when the people are, when even TV stations are banned in the country, when painting is banned, when sculpture is banned, when cinema industry is banned, what kind of culture we are talking? Even books. To read a book, you cannot read a book. There was a strong censorship towards book also. A part of religious book, nothing else was available in the book market of Kabul if the book market was left there. But at the same time, many musicians give up to very, very low paid jobs. Our very well-known Afghan, the sarinda player Mashinai, who've been very popular back in 1970s and 80s, to make a living, he joined a butcher shop as a shop assistant. Some other musician who had other skills, like I know another musician, Muhammad Rasul, a tambour player, he knew how to fix watches. So he put a small tray on the streets and was fixing and repairing watches of the people. While other musicians, there's a story and there's even a film available. A very well-known tabla player of the country was begging on the streets of Kabul to make a living. That's what we went through.
And then there also were these public hangings almost every day in Kabul, and that it was obligatory for men to grow their beards and so on.
Of course, everything was controlled, including you were not allowed even to shave. It was your beard, but the control was to someone else. So that's what's happened. And the sports stadium of Afghanistan was converted into execution field.
Ahmad, I know that you're an optimist, and you obviously have to be an optimist to do what you are doing. But I have to ask you still, as a journalist, that now we can see in Afghanistan that the Taliban are advancing in a way, and they are, according to late figures from BBC, 50% of the country is 50% of the population in Afghanistan, that is around 15 million people, are currently living in areas either completely controlled by the Taliban, that is just around 5%, or with a very powerful presence of the Taliban, powerful military presence. What do you say about this? Are you, and now it's currently a ceasefire between Taliban and the Afghan government, and some people think that it should be negotiations about some kind of power sharing. We don't know that yet. But are you worried about a bigger Taliban influence in the Afghan government, if I put the question like that?
It's my strong belief that what's happening in Afghanistan, and many people in this audience probably hear from the media that a bombing took place here, a bombing took place there. All this spectacular bombing is nothing else than a sign of weakness of the Taliban. When you said that they're controlling 15% of the territory, but I said that they don't control anything. They terrorize 15% of the Afghan people, because the majority of the Afghan people are now young people. Young people, very open-minded. And the changes in the last 17 years, especially the social media, the cable television, the Sputnik TV in Afghanistan, the increased number of boys and girls in the school of the country played a significant role towards the change in the mentality of the Afghan people and Afghan citizens. I strongly believe that this young generation, they're not going to allow anyone to turn the wheel of history backward. And they're going to resist, and there's no social basis and social support for the Taliban. I understand that some narrow-minded, ignorant people might join the rank of the Taliban, but militarily they are not in a position to defeat the central government. They might organize attacks, but even until now, in all this last 15 years, they were not able even to get control of any major cities of Afghanistan. So, to me, they are on the run. to me, the defeat day is very, very close, and that's why the ceasefire that taking place in Afghanistan, it's a wonderful sign for the better future for the country. And in the almost 40 years of war in Afghanistan, that's the first time that the fighting parties are respecting ceasefire and agreeing on a ceasefire. We see the ceasefire should begin on this coming Friday, and we will see that both parties would be respecting that. If it will be respected, it clearly shows that we are getting closer and closer to the end of war in Afghanistan.
I surely hope that you're right, but we cannot be sure about anything right there. But I agree.
I'm on the ground, and I see people every day, and I see how much hope is alive in Afghanistan, and I see how much people are tiding their hope with the future, with the brighter future of Afghanistan. And there's many, many good examples that gives me that optimism. And once you're dealing there, once you deal with the children and the youth of Afghanistan, and you deal with their families, you see, I'll give you many, many examples that you all hear this bombing happening in Afghanistan, especially in Kabul, on a daily basis. Dozens of people they are getting killed on a daily, but the response is always amazing. It's such an amazing response always that you can see that no one gonna give up. Recently, the Intercontinental was bombed in Afghanistan. What's happened next day? The moment it was cleaned, the restaurant was again open. And people were there, their families again went there, not scared of anything, to enjoy their life. When my music school came under attack, or our concert came under attack, my biggest fear was that no students will be coming back to the school. No parents going to allow their child to come back to the school, because a statement has been issued also afterward that they're going to continue to attack the music school. But the moment we resume our activities, every single student was back on the schoolyard. It clearly shows the resilience of the Afghan people. That's the way how they show their response to those radical forces. That, come on, you're killing 1 or 2 or 10, but still we continue, and we're not going to give up to you.
That's good to hear. Now we get into this situation with this bombing of your own school, which obviously we have to talk somewhat about it, because you were hurt there and you were nearly killed yourself, actually. And this was in the French Cultural Institute in Kabul, a very beautiful place. I've been there myself, also fantastic arena for music. And with your orchestra and also a group of students, young students, performing a play about suicide bombings, an anti-play, anti-suicide bombings. And therefore, this was a threat against the Taliban. They had reacted, and they had deliberately sent a very young suicide bomber to get you or your school. So this young person came forward in the Cultural Institute and exploded the bomb quite close to you. Describe this.
I've been asked this question many, many times.
Of course,
and,
sure.
The issue is that, yes, it clearly shows that our school is becoming very influential. It clearly shows that we are making an impact on the social fabric of the country. It clearly shows that music transforms Afghan society. And especially when we always put our musical voice for doing advocacy for social justice in the country, and also doing advocacy for peace and stability in Afghanistan. And the show that you're referring to, it was a musical drama that our school, one of ensemble of our school, was jointly with a young group of actors from a private theater called Azdar. They played a show which was called The Heartbeat After the Bombing. And the idea was to condemn the suicide bombing, and also to depict and to show the miseries and the impact that it makes on the life of the people, how it terrorizes, how it affects families, how it affects community. The show began probably exactly at 5 o'clock, sharp 5 o'clock. And about 10 to 15 minutes of the show was going on, then I heard some kind of noise from outside, and I reached my mobile phone to see if there's something happening. My driver always alerts me and asks me for an advice. And in this moment, when I was reaching my phone from my pocket, I don't know what's happened, I dropped it on the floor. And that was the moment that that suicide bomber that has been assigned to go and to act there, he exploded himself, and that show that was supposed to condemn suicide bombing, it was turned into a reality show. And you could see at the beginning of the show, I saw the actors on the stage, and the show began also with the with the sound of an explosion. And then the portrait was displayed on the screen in backward. And then actors were playing that how, as a maid, people are running up and down to find their families, on their phone to call. But then I saw all this happen in the same concert studio. I clearly remember, I don't know what's happened with me. I was unconscious, I don't know for how long. But when I was waking up, still I didn't know. I couldn't hear anything, but I could see that it's dark. There's a lot of smoke in the room. When I was trying to come out of the concert venue, my leg stuck on something, and when I looked down, there was my leg was in the coat of a woman who was either injured or killed. But still, I was not comprehending what's happened. And when I made my way outside to the lobby of the concert hall, I saw the director of the French Institute standing there, holding her mobile phone. And still, I was not I was not understanding that I lost my hearing ability.
You were deaf at
Yeah,
that
I was
moment.
totally deaf in that moment. And I approached that director and asked, what's happened? She was talking to something, but I was not hearing. I thought probably there's a lot of noise because people were crying. And then I asked again what's happened. And then she typed on her mobile phone and showed to me that there was a suicide bombing took place inside of the venue. And in that moment, and then I remembered, hey, you have kids on the stage and they're playing. What's happened with them? And I rushed back to the venue, and in that moment, the security forces arrived, and they were trying to prevent me from getting inside of the venue because they were thinking that another bombing might take again, and they were not allowing anyone to get in. But I made my way, and they couldn't control me. I went into. It was practically, you were there many, many times. You see the stage. It seems like here. It was an amphitheater, and the stage was as close. And when I reached the stage, I saw that the musical instrument was spread all over the stage. But I didn't see anybody on the stage. I didn't see any injured person. That immediately was a kind of pacifying me that things is probably good. It's not as bad as you imagining. And then I went backstage. There was a lot of people crying, screaming, and they were making their way out to rescue. And I saw one of my students, a tabla player, and I said, what's happening? Is everyone okay? And he was talking and responding, but I couldn't hear him.
And one person was also killed, and that was a German person, former employee of Swedish Committee for Afghanistan, by the way, also.
Yeah, he was, I saw him. I remember because he was sitting behind my back, and the same was the terrorist sitting behind me. Half of his head was
blown away.
It wasn't there. Clearly, I remember his face. He was probably in his 50s. He had gray hair. I saw that half of his head. But also a very young Afghan journalist died after 2 days or 3 days of his injuries.
And many people were injured also. And you yourself, you had 11 pieces of shrapnel in your head.
Yeah, I lost
skull.
my both eardrums have been blown away, and at the same time I had 11 sharpness on my head and some sharpness on my back. So I needed also to get some treatment. I left Afghanistan.
And you, who are a music professor and had devoted your complete life to music, you were first completely deaf.
Yeah.
And then your hearing was badly damaged, and with lots of surgeries in Australia.
That was also a very strange feeling when you go through such a circumstances. When you survive a bombing and then you notice that you can't hear. But the other happiness is that you're still alive. You can see, still you can work. That was my feeling. That's when I noticed that I can't hear, but what was helping me to pacify it was that, yeah, you living in Australia, you go back, the medicine is very advanced, they're definitely gonna fix your hearing, but at the same time I was telling to myself, even if they do not fix your hearing, but again, you're alive, you can see your family back, you can come back and work with your students, and you appreciate the life when you get so close to the death. I remember when I was dismissed from the hospital after 2 days, and then I had to seek treatment somewhere else. It was the beginning of winter in Afghanistan. And the moment when I left the ward and I was on the yard of the hospital, that chilling hair on my face, and when I look at the trees and when I look at the blue sky of Afghanistan, in that moment I really appreciated life, that how much life means for you. And that time I see that being in this world is so beautiful, and we have to take every moment advantage to live it the way that every human being deserves to live. And we should not make this world hell for others. On the contrary, we should use our skills and our abilities to turn the world into a safe haven, into a beautiful garden for everyone.
I have to ask you, obviously a music professor, how is your hearing today?
Sometimes I give the example of what's happened with my ear. Probably I'm going to repeat it again here. At the beginning, when I began slowly getting my hearing, I began listening to the people, like I began hearing people. But I had 24/7 a noise in my ear, which I can compare to a complete symphony orchestra when every member of this orchestra plays out of tune and very loud. But
That
today,
does not sound nice.
No, but it's getting better, and today I can tune the instrument back myself. So now I can hear a tuned symphony orchestra, but it's 80% back.
80% back.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that. And the thing here, we are letting in some questions from the audience here. I just have one more question. Most people, Ahmad, I would say, would back down after an incident like this, when you almost are killed, actually. But you did not. You did quite the opposite. You expanded instead. You have built a new concert hall and a new dormitory for girls. You have 300 students at this school, 100 of them are girls. Why did you do that? Why did you not back down and get rid of everything?
Today in my country there is a fight going on, a fight between darkness and light. A fight between progressive forces and the dark forces. It's our obligation to stay the course. And we cannot give up. By giving up, if I'm going to give up, leave the country, if someone else is going to leave the country, who's going to stand against these dark forces? And the aim is to force people of influence to leave the country, either to be dead or scare them to leave the country. Leaving Afghanistan in that stage meant for me to accept the victory of the dark forces. I was not ready to accept that victory, and still I'm not ready to do this. And at the same time, what I built in Afghanistan is a beacon of hope.
With the soft power of music, as you say.
Yes, and I want to keep that beacon of hope alive, because it's hope that keeps us alive. If we're going to give hope, it means that nothing is left. And again, I stay there. I don't have a Kalashnikov to fight people. But I've got in my disposal the powerful and transformative beauty of music. My response and the response of the school to this dark forces was, the formation of all women orchestra of Afghanistan. That's probably the most beautiful response, and at the same time most powerful response, because those forces are against women.
And they are coming here, as you heard before, next year. Zora, this orchestra.
Yes, next year we have a play. It's
On 8th
already
of March.
confirmed. 8th of March will be here, and you will see that's how Afghan children and all these Afghan young people will be speaking the same language that is understood all throughout the world. And they will be joining by some young musician also from Stockholm in the orchestra.
Ahmad, you wanted some questions from the audience also. Do we have any? Anyone want? Yeah, we have one up there, waving.
Hello, my name is Emilia Amper. I'm a musician and a composer. I play the traditional Swedish instrument nyckelharpa. First of all, thank you. It's such an honor to hear you speak, very inspirational. I'm thinking about what's happening in Sweden right now, because Sweden, like generally, is a very fantastic country. We are, compared to other countries, equal and peaceful, and it's nice. But we have a big problem now, and I'm really scared about this, that the right-wing populist party is growing. I would even call it racist party with Nazi roots, and they are becoming really, really big. And it's so scary for me. And in one way, they love what I do because I'm a Swedish folk musician, you know, speaking about like the national traditions. But the reaction from the folk music environment is just like, don't come here, you know. We are, in my experience, the most anti-racist environment that I know, so it's very open-minded. But I was just wondering about this because it's so difficult. They are growing so much now. What is going on? And I was just wondering, what advice would you give to Sweden in fighting, before bad things happen? I don't know if you know a lot about Swedish politics right now, but it's the really right-wing scary party is really growing. And what advice and thoughts do you have for Sweden and Swedish politicians and Swedish leaders and just the Swedish people about this?
Freedom of expression is not granted in any country at all. That we can be sure of. Not even in Sweden. Your advice?
Well, what's happening in many countries today in the world, I see it's very closely associated with what's happening in Muslim world also. In one hand, we have got that extremism in our fields. But that extremism led to the fact that millions of people have been displaced. And they're reaching here also. And the narrow-minded extremists anywhere in the world, they normally see they're using such a circumstance and such a situation here. But by the end of the day, we all are human beings. I strongly believe that the same way that we're standing against extremism in our backyard, you may do the same, but you're in a much, much better position than in which we are located. You've got your weapon, which is your vote. So when you're going voting, that's the way that you can stop them. By your vote, you've got the most powerful weapon in your hands, everyone. But that's slowly taking place in my country also. We will be having election very, very soon. You've been in Afghanistan and you probably are very well aware of the parliament of this nation. But I'm confident that this election, though still obviously there will be a lot of corruption during the election. There will be a lot of fraud. But what gives us hope, it's the emergence of many, many young independent politicians in Afghanistan. That's where I advise my people to use your weapon, use your vote. In this manner, we can clean the house of the people the parliament and bring the real people who believe in diversity and respect.
Maybe we have 3 minutes left. One more question, if you have one. No, we will finish ourselves, Ahmad. And you have great plans, obviously, for the future with the orchestra. You are traveling a lot and all over the world, and you are making an impact all over the place when you are traveling. I obviously have to ask you, you are here because of the Polar Music Prize, and this Polar Music Prize would not have been the same, I guess, without a Swedish pop group called ABBA. Have you heard them?
A lot, and I danced on the tunes many, many times as a young man.
You That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Metallica, what do you say about them then? The other, I mean, we have Lars Ulrich coming up here now with Jan Gradvall in just a few minutes. Do you listen to Metallica?
Yes, and it's such a great pleasure for me to receive this award together with Metallica.
Really?
I've got deep respect for Metallica and what they do in terms of not only spreading rock music throughout of the world, but their commitment to freedom of expression through music. That's a common value that we share. We both believe we both believe that freedom of expression through music is a universal human right, and that brings us very close to each other also. One last question,
Okay.
We have 50 seconds left here. Your vision for ANIM, Afghanistan National Musical Institute, in 10 years, where will you stand? You have 40 seconds left.
In every provinces of Afghanistan.
In every province of Afghanistan?
Yeah, I have got a big dream to plan sister branch of ANIM in other provinces and part of the country. At the moment, we've got only one music school, but in 10 years, at least I would like to see three more music schools, at least one in northern part of the country for northern provinces, one in western part of the country for the western provinces, and one in eastern part of the country for children, to give them access to music education also. At the moment, I'm pleased to have students from all over Afghanistan in my school, but my resources are very limited, so I want to see the branches of ANIM everywhere in Afghanistan, planted everywhere in Afghanistan.
Good to hear. Dr. Ahmad Sarmast, so worthy this prize.
Thank you very much. I give this beautiful flower to my beautiful wife, without whose support and sacrifices I wouldn't accomplish what I achieved. Thank you, Mary.